Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to another DevOps.com webinar. I'm Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief, CEO of MediaOps, publishers of DevOps.com. And this is my very first webinar on my new iMac M1 chip. So I'm still figuring out how to make the camera go. Oh, I think I might have just did it there. Still figuring out the cameras and mics. I hope you can hear me and see me. But they are pretty. I'll tell you that. Anyway, thanks for joining us on today's webinar. We have a great webinar today. It's a DevOps community as the epicenter of the software innovation. Really, it's going to be a great review of the recent JFrog SwampUp virtual event, which was held. It's probably about 3 weeks ago now. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce you to our panel. Let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. Here at MediaOps, we use something called the Big Marker system for our webinars, which is what you're in right now. It's pretty cool. You don't need any download plugins or extensions. Pops up right in your browser. Most of you are seeing it's the slide that introduced this webinar and hopefully our faces down at the bottom there. We'll work on that in a minute. But I want to address your attention to what we call the communications module in Big Marker. And that's to the right of your screen for most of you. You'll see along the top, it's chat, Q&A, polls, handouts. There's a lot of different ways to interact on this platform. If you go to chat, underneath chat, you'll see there's public chat, presenters, private, chat, and Twitter. We don't have Twitter chat activated for today. If you want to make a statement publicly for the world, or at least everyone who's on our webinar to see, feel free to just type that right in there in the public chat section of the browser. And, if you want to just say hi wherever you're from, hi from, I don't know where you might be from, California, Florida, New York, London, Delhi, Tel Aviv, wherever, you feel free to do so. If you had a friend on here that you wanted to do some private chat with, you could go into private, or if you wanted to private chat with someone, you can go do that. I'll just remind you all that this is not Tinder or Match.com. Don't be going after random people to say hi. You come to webinars often. It's really to chat with people you know. Here we got some chats coming in today, which is great. Oh, Torino, Italy. I love Italy. Torino, especially Denver, Orlando, Switzerland. Love the internet. Also, we have our presenter, and there's India checking in. Glad to see someone from India. Hope all's well. We also have, though, besides chat, there's another section called Q&A. Q&A is just that, Q&A. This is where you can ask questions of our panel. And guys, we have, this is an interactive roundtable. This is not a slideshow today. So I am hoping you guys will ask a ton of questions. If you want to ask questions of the panel, put that in the Q&A section, and I will ask them of the panel. The panel, if they so choose, can interact with people in public chat as well, or even private chat for that matter. So when this thing's running well, there's a lot of ways to communicate it. Lots of very interactive. So please feel free to put things there in Q&A if you have any questions of the panel. One other area I want to bring out to you today, and that's the polls section. We don't use it at every webinar, but we are going to use it today. Because today's event is really focused on kind of review some of the highlights and lessons that we gleaned from the recent SwampUp virtual event, I wanted to get an idea from our audience of how many of you actually attended JFrog SwampUp this year, which was virtual. So, because if you're already there, we could talk about things that perhaps you did, and we can ask you, what did you think, and so forth. But if you didn't attend, we'll do our best to kind of give you the flavor for it. So we're going to start our poll right now. Don't let me have to chase you down here. It's just really a yes or no. Did you attend JFrog SwampUp event? And if you don't mind submitting, I don't know how many of you will, but we're going to close. I'm not going to keep it open forever. We're going to close this off in like 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and close it off. So I saw the numbers here, though. We had more people not attend than attend. Okay, that's great, though. Not to worry. Our friends from JFrog, Melissa McKay is here. I'm going to introduce her in a moment. We're going to ask her if I believe the SwampUp sessions are still available for people who want to go do that, who want to go see it if you didn't attend.
Yes, they are. They are online on demand now, where you can go.
So you can watch those, because, we only have an hour today, and I've already spoken too much. So we're not going to be able to go through the whole SwampUp agenda today. We're just talking about a couple of things, but I do encourage you to go check that out. Let me now introduce you to our panel for today. Right? I mentioned from JFrog, we have Melissa McKay. And Melissa, if you would say hello and maybe a little bit about your role at JFrog.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Melissa McKay. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm based here. So I work remotely for JFrog right now. I've been with JFrog for about 1.5 years now. I started right when all of the Corona stuff started. So it's been a really interesting experience. I did switch roles from being an engineer to a developer advocate, which has been a crazy, wonderful experience. I really love this position. It gives me a chance to teach and share my passion and share the experience that I've had over the past 20 years in various roles as a developer. So yeah, I'm glad to be here today. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So I'm going over to the dark side a little bit, but an engineer.
No. It's the best side.
Absolutely. Let me next introduce our next guest, and I'm going to mangle his name, and then I'm going to ask him to repeat his name because I just can't. I do my best, but it's Andreas Alamari. But Andreas, you say it.
Yes, you got the first one right.
All right, there.
Alamirai, yes.
Okay, and Andreas, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little of your background.
So, well, I'm Andres. I'm originally from Mexico, currently living in Switzerland, working for Oracle my second time. And most of my career has been dedicated as a software engineer. And like Melissa, I did the switch to being a DevRel, and now it's been close to 3 years already. And so what I love and I really enjoy is working with open source projects and figure out ways that we can have these projects be released and built with ease and without so many complications. Of course, it's easier said than done, but that's precisely why we're here.
Absolutely. And then last but not least on our panel today is Valerie Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay. You know what? It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but okay, I got it right. Valerie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Absolutely. So I am vastly different in my career than our esteemed guests. I'm sort of a noob. I'm on year 3 in DevOps. In a past life, I did close personal protection, and I was a bar bouncer. So it's been a really interesting transition into software. But I did a coding boot camp and fell in love with all things automation and efficiency. As it turns out, I think of DevOps as like the stay-at-home mom of the developer team, the person who coordinates everything and makes sure that things run smoothly. I fell in love with the culture, and I fell in love with the community around it. I don't know enough yet to go into DevRel, but when I grow up and I learn more, that is
never grow up, Valerie. Never grow up.
It's a trap.
Yeah. It's a suicide rap. Get out while you're young. Someone wrote that already. Anyway, but thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, guys, more than half the audience, it looks like, has not attended SwampUp, and hopefully they'll go check out some sessions. But from my view, where I sit, certainly this past year has been a year where digital transformation has been the lingua franca. Digital transformation has sort of been the shining light amid all of the darkness and gloom and suffering that we've seen with COVID. And you can't have digital transformation without software, right? Software drives digital transformation, and DevOps drives software development. DevOps is, as the title of our session today, DevOps is at the epicenter of our software innovation. So, and that was really one of the big theme at SwampUp this year, which is, DevOps is the center. DevOps is where it's happening. First of all, I wanted to ask the three of you, do you agree with that, number one? And then number two, if each of you can give us an example maybe of how that theme was kind of driven home for you in any session you'd like to speak about, whether you participated or you watched or what have you. So, Melissa, I don't want to pick on you, but as the JFrog person, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Sure, gladly. I've been thinking about this a lot. Over the past year and a half, I think I've learned more about presentation tools, online presentation tools, than I ever have in my entire career. And that is not just, the online tool sets, but also all of the frameworks that are coming out, all of the cloud native technologies that are coming out, the organizations that have been created, and all of these, businesses and organizations coming together to get some common ground on how we're going to move forward and how to make this more manageable for developers and operations, all the way from writing the code in the beginning to delivering it in the end. So I think I was on a panel recently, and a thought came to my mind that we're actually pretty young still. We're still coming up with all of the pieces and parts and trying to figure out how things can be organized in such a way that we can put them all together into a bigger vehicle. And I use the word vehicle on purpose because I'm going to use the car analogy. Think about how many of us today would be driving cars if we had to build them ourselves. I know I certainly wouldn't, right? I am looking for the manufacturer. I go to the manufacturer, I look at the cars, and does it drive? Does it go fast? Is it a stick shift? Is it automatic? What's the gas mileage? Those are the things that I'm worried about so that I can get to where I need to go. And I feel like we're at this stage where we're starting to come out with the manufacturers when it comes to cloud native applications and products. We're still working out some of the details on what the parts are exactly, but we're getting there. We're getting there, and I foresee, in the next several years, we're going to have some pretty solid manufacturers coming out. I know JFrog is definitely a part of that movement for sure. Our engineers have certainly been busy the last year. They've been, churning out new tools, new technologies that we can leverage to get to this ideal position where everyone is driving a car. So yeah, pretty exciting. I do agree with that. We are moving in that direction. And I think the biggest work that we have right now is how to make it more accessible to more people.
Panel members, thoughts on this? I have thoughts on it, but I'm going to let you guys talk first.
So I feel like the pandemic was just a huge catalyst for software in general to make big changes. I mean, I'll compare it to home life. I mean, how many times do you see an area of your home where there's a project that if you just did that project, your life could be more efficient, but you're never going to get around to it because you're always busy. It's the same way. I mean, how many pieces of software have people worked on where a complete refactor would just make night and day difference? But when would you do that? With what time? Like, what features would have to be sacrificed for how long to refactor? And I feel like, companies like JFrog and innovative companies that want to be forward thinking, that the pandemic forced so many things to be online. So many companies that didn't really care about their online presence or online offerings to suddenly have to care if they'd like to stay afloat. And I feel like it has been not a renaissance for DevOps, but close. I mean, so many vast improvements and so many new tools that aren't just superfluous fluff tools, like actually useful. I mean, I feel like DevSecOps in particular, like, again, we've had so many big breaches hit the news. I feel like there's been this major shift in DevOps culture where everyone is responsible for security now. There's no longer a security team. We are all security engineers. I think it's been interesting to see how rapidly the community community of companies that make these tools has been able to respond to these needs and these changes and are now online life.
Agreed. Andres, thoughts?
Well, so combining both things mentioned by Valerie and Melissa, what I can say is that, continuing with that analogy of the car, an automaker doesn't do things alone. They have to ask parts done by other makers. So they produce specifications and there are interfaces for these components to communicate. And in our world, that comparison will be APIs. Whether you offer them REST APIs or it's command line tools, stuff that you have well-defined inputs and there will be well-defined outputs given how these things work. So we have seen much more of these tools and APIs happening in the last couple of years. And this boost came out because of COVID. Because now you have these different teams working across all time zones, all different places. They need to talk in a different way. It's not just, I'm going to open a video chat and see what happens. We have things like chat ops. You have bots that suddenly do more stuff than just, here's your pizza. Now, these things are producing artifacts, are pushing releases, are giving you the binaries and then sending information to your users and then bringing that feedback as well. We got stuff like GitOps as well. It's the same idea, empowering developers with the tools that they already know, they use every single day, but to reach out to other areas where the job that used to be done by other teams, whether they cannot do it anymore because of the pressure, because of the stress of being remote or being with the situation that we have, we just spread it out across the whole organization. Now we have more capabilities. But because of that, we have to be aware of the consequences of what we're doing. So that goes into security, what Valerie said. It's not just, I have a tool, I have a hammer, I'm going to use it. You have to use it wisely.
Absolutely. All three of you said, I think, some really important things here. You're right, Andreas. APIs are the handshake of the software digital transformation world, right? That's how one component talks to another, and it is components, right? Again, borrowing that car paradigm. My friend John Willis would love it because he's always talking about Professor Deming, right? And the Toyota Kata and models and stuff, lean manufacturing. But it's very much about supply chains. We're going to talk more about supply chains and security a little later, but it's about a software supply chain. And the interesting thing, Melissa, to your point about, software manufacturing factories, if you will, is those components can change, right? You mentioned a manual stick shift versus, transmission. I read an article yesterday that basically manual transmissions are history. No one's ordering them anymore. Our children won't know what a stick shift was like that, right? Especially new cars, they don't even have they're out automatics and they don't have shifts. Tesla does it automatically. The BMW has this little Swarovski crystal now that you turn. So, it's as components, they'll be electric, not gas. They'll be autonomous driven. You're not going to drive, your children won't drive their cars. But they'll still be cars. They'll still be automobiles, there'll still be software. The components and all of that changes. So, this to me is the true power of DevOps, is that as these things are advancing and accelerating, the factory remains. The supply chain is a supply chain. What we supply into it, what the product looks like may change, right? You look at Salesforce, right? When I first, an old Siemens user here, right? Way back, Salesforce came out. Wow, what a revelation that was. But when you look at Force today versus what Salesforce was in 2003 or something, it's still Salesforce, but it's a very different car.
It is. It is the state-of-the-art, fanciest car on the planet. I might be a little bit biased, but
I'd expect nothing less. But it's true, right? I mean, that's the beauty of a software world. It's funny. We had some issues at MediaOps this week, right? We were a victim of a DDoS attack, and it bummed us out. Our site was down on and off for about almost a day and a half. And we decided maybe we'll look at different hosting providers. We're not going to give names, but we're in the cloud on Kubernetes, and we looked and we called one hosting provider, and the guy says, well, what kind of server do you want? We could give you a 4-way, a 16-way server with so much RAM. Like it was a real server, a box that they were going to rack mount. Now, I was in the hosting business in the mid-'90s. I was giving that speech in 1996, 97. I couldn't believe I was hearing it today, right? Because it's all software. We live in software today. And I think that's the lesson that we need to really take out of things like SwampUp, which is it's about the software. Software drives transformation, and DevOps drives software. That being said, I'll step off the soapbox. I'd like to ask each of you, what was your favorite session? Either because personally it just kind of hit you where you're right between the eyes, or you just thought it was a great session for the world to understand kind of the power of DevOps and where we are. Valerie, you went last time, so I'm going to ask you to go first.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever attended a talk by Kat Cosgrove that wasn't stellar in every possible way.
She's great, isn't she? Yeah.
She's one of my favorite humans. But she did one on developer education. And again, I might be biased as someone who daily, being 3 years into his career, has to ask questions and is constantly. So I'm going to give a counterpoint to what you just said. While it is awesome as far as DevOps and efficiency and all these things to abstract away, and there is a server somewhere on a rack. We just don't have to deal with it anymore. As someone trying to learn in this environment, there's so much that I don't know. I'll give the example of, if my son does inherit a Tesla, when he's ready to drive, he'll never know how to drive a stick, and he won't know that that's a thing. What happens when that tech breaks down and the only car to get his drunk friends home is a stick shift? What happens if no one has that knowledge, or at least very few people, and so back to Kat Cosgrove's talk, as someone who's going through this process of trying to learn software in a world of abstraction, her talk on basically how not to demean, speak down to, or in any way frustrate people you're trying to educate really hit home for me. I mean, she gave just little nuggets of advice, things like don't assume your audience knows the acronyms you're throwing out, or even the basic words. Like, come up with a glossary and provide that so that they don't have to be overwhelmed with things they don't know. But yeah, no, I don't think I've ever heard her speak and not been massively impressed. Again, someone I'd like to be when I grow up. But this talk in particular really hit home for me.
Agreed. Yeah, there was a good one. I actually jumped into that one. Andreas, you're kind of the man in the middle always. I start with one or the other, but you're in the middle. But if you don't, I'll let you go first next time. But you're the middle guy for this one. Go ahead.
Well, now I wish I had made it to that session. I had no clue why I didn't, but luckily I can watch that again. In my case, there were 2 days for, at least for me, 2 days for SwamUp version on the Americas, and another version for Europe, for EMEA. So of course, the version in the Americas was too late for me because of time difference. So I didn't make that many sessions that time. And but I was able to catch up the beginning, which was the opening keynote, where JFrog presented their vision with the platform. And I have to say that I'm one of the founders, super frogs, like Valerie. So we have access to full information coming from the platform, what's coming down the pipeline. And it's quite exciting for some of the things that we, particularly in our little cave, look at what we can do with those tools. So having a glimpse of what's coming down the pipeline is interesting. I'm pretty sure I won't use everything because that does not apply to what I do. But knowing that there will be other team members that will be able to rely on those tools makes me think that, yes, we're progressing. And again, because of the time difference, I sadly didn't make that many sessions besides my own. And I saw Valerie. Valerie was right before my session.
Excellent. Melissa?
Well, there were a lot of sessions to choose from, that is for sure. I think what hit home to me, and I guess what hit me personally, was actually a session that I did with Docker. It's called End-to-End DevOps for Containerized Applications with JFrog and Docker. I feel like the whole idea that those two together are really good examples of these tool sets that I'm talking about that are really going to push us forward into getting that car out there and driving. And I say driving because more and more developers, especially on DevOps teams, are going to they need to understand the driving state. You know, how is your software actually deployed? How is it working in the real world? For so many years, I was a developer in the, very much a silo. I, focused on my local machine, worked on my local code. I really enjoyed that. And there was a period of time of learning for me there. But once you transition to a DevOps team, there is so much more to know that happens on the other side after the code has been developed and delivered. And learning some of those things, learning how my app is deployed and how it is behaving like in a cloud native architecture, for example, make some differences in how you would decide how to design that code to begin with. So a lot of those decisions are moving closer and closer to the developer. Not only that, but security as well. Dealing with, I'm a Java developer primarily. So when I pull up my POM file and I decide to put in a new package, what do I know about that package? Do I know if there are vulnerabilities in there? If I'm focused on just developing my code every day, I may not be doing that kind of research, right? So having tools like JFrog X-Ray, for example, they have a really cool tool. It's an IDE integration. You can pull it right into your, IntelliJ, bring it in. I can pull up my POM file and I can see immediately what known problems are going on in my POM file before I even commit that code to source. It's pretty amazing how far we've come, and it's a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot of new material to learn. Just learning how those vulnerabilities are detected and how they're categorized and organized. That's a whole nother can of worms to get into. So I see in the future, more tools around that to make that process a little bit easier for developers to consume. The talk that I brought up, the Docker and JFrog one, I thought it was really cool because for a long time as a developer, all I would ever do is maybe launch an application on my local machine. But if I really want to get into it and I want to be able to deploy my app to a cloud testing environment, or even, really understand how it's being deployed in production, Being able to put together, my Docker file using the security tools that I have and understanding where those images are coming from. Also with, being able to deploy using Docker Compose directly into ECS. I mean, I thought that was pretty cool. One point, and I'm sorry I don't remember if it was Andres or Valerie that mentioned this, but we're excited about getting these tools built and put together and starting to use them. But I think we might be a little bit slower on making sure those tools are safe. We have some hammers with some very sharp, scary edges out there. So I think that's another area that we need to improve on and start working on, is making these safe. And Valerie, to your point, as a new developer or someone new in the industry, you don't know what you don't know. You're depending on someone to keep you from running out into the street, right? Because you don't know about cars yet. Yeah. So we need to be careful as makers of these tools, make sure that they are safe to be consumed by the public.
Right. If I may follow up quickly. One of the reasons why I started in this industry to work with computers is because I didn't want to talk to people. And turns out that software is mostly talking to people, and writing code is the least amount of things that you do. The reason why I mentioned this is that, just like Melissa said with Docker, if I were just a regular developer that is only concentrating on their task, and then I've been told, you need to switch a Boolean parameter for this application and then go into deployment, for me, it's so easy to just touch one resource and that's it. But do I think about the consequences that will go into the DevOps team or whoever else needs to package that thing and then deploy it into many different places? Perhaps, from my point of view, it's just one switch, just one thing, a small thing. But down the road, that is going to snowball into some other things. So now, with the way that we think on DevOps, we're bringing those considerations across many different teams. And this requires more communication. Yes, we can learn many tools, but the most important thing that we could do in our industry is talk to each other.
Absolutely. So I'll weigh in here. Melissa, it's funny you picked the Docker presentation with them, because I had actually covered maybe a week or two before SwampUp, or a couple weeks before SwampUp, the announcement of the Docker JFrog partnership. And I think what's really interesting is we have Valerie from Salesforce here and Andreas from Oracle. And, the panel I moderated was 4 or 5. I had Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO of JFrog. We had the CEO of Elastic, Datadog, not Atlassian, HashiCorp, and PagerDuty. Did I say PagerDuty? Yeah, no. So that was 5. And me. So we had 6 CEOs all talking about a common ecosystem, a common supply chain. We're all third-party providers in this supply chain of the software factory. Salesforce, Oracle, they all are. And that to me is really the power of why DevOps is at the epicenter right now, right? We are, when I first started DevOps.com, it was about like companies like Chef and Puppet that allowed you to automate and go faster by automation. But really what we see now is this supply chain paradigm. And it's not one company, because one company can't do it all, right? It's about platforms. It's about partnerships. It's about APIs, allowing components to communicate. And that to me really demonstrated how far we've come in DevOps. That you had, I think out of the 5 companies, 3 of them at least are public. There's probably, valuation-wise, I don't know, it's a couple of $100 billion worth of companies up there, right? It's an amazing feat. My goodness, this has really come a long way. I wanted now, though, turn to security a little bit. A lot of you have mentioned it. This year we learned hard lessons around supply chain security, right? We've had multiple attacks. I'm not getting into the ransomware and all the other stuff that we've had to live with, right? But let's focus in on supply chain attacks, because as it relates to DevOps, there were many security lessons at SwampUp this year, many security orientated things. DevSecOps shifting left. I think that, and I'll ask the panel to weigh in on this. We need, as an industry, to say we want to empower developers to develop more secure software by giving them safer tools, better security tools to check their work product, better testing. But we need to be careful that the developer, we don't overburden the developer as the security person as well, right? We need to empower the developer to develop more secure code, but the developer can't be the tester, the security person, the developer, the deployer, the SRE, and everything else under the sun, right? Developing software is hard. Even today, it's still got to know what you're doing a little bit. So where does this, right? So where do we strike a balance? And was there anything at SwampUp that kind of hit you about this, of how do we make our software more secure, but also not overly burden our developers thinking they're the security people? It's all our responsibility, but we need security people too. Andreas, you get to go first.
All right. Well, again, in my case, in my particular island, my presentation was about the X-Ray API. And the reason why is because I like working with APIs and of all kinds. So in this case, it's REST. I also write a lot of CLI and desktop applications for this reason. And so you can think of two things here. One is the product itself that gives you package scanning, and you can search for vulnerabilities in many different kind of binaries. And another is the API itself that gives you access to those capabilities. So JFrog chose to use, let's say, a standard, regular, run-of-the-mill REST API instead of using GraphQL or something weird. So that makes it easier for any developer to get into, to get a feeling of the interface that they need to talk to. But in the same way, the kind of endpoints, the data, the operations, the formats that are supported, some of them are intrinsically more secure than others because encoding and so many other reasons. So all these concerns, how they properly encode the data, how to really talk to that service, what extra tokens or some other measures of signatures and checksums or whatnot might be needed in order to avoid replay attacks. Something like a regular developer doesn't think of is, I just need to send one request to that endpoint and I get something. But an attacker will see what happens if I somehow massage the data and the payload gives me access to something that I shouldn't be getting access to. Or if I replay a request that gives me access to secret information that otherwise I wouldn't, right? So as the makers of APIs, as those that need to expose products and services through APIs, we need to think about those things. But as a consumer, I typically don't see those things. I would expect the thing just to work, right?
And be safe and secure.
Right, out of the box, exactly.
Thoughts?
Ladies first.
I agree. I think, back to the car analogy. When we get a car, we expect it to be relatively safe to drive. I think that's funny that I say that, considering how many car accidents happen all the time. But in general, I'm not afraid that I'm going to be burned alive by engine parts while I'm driving, right? So I think that there's responsibility in the makers, for one. but the developers, Alan, you brought up the point, like how much is the developer actually responsible for? And I think if you are a developer of one of those products, you are responsible. Just like a cook is responsible for what ingredients get put in a dish during cooking and serving, I think there is a level of responsibility that a developer has to, at the very least, understand where the ingredients of your product are coming from. There are so many times that I've seen in my career where we have all of our, like, the ways we build our software and stuff, and usually they're pretty simple, and developers are set up, new developers are set up to use those tools, right out of the gate. But sometimes we forget to explain how dependencies are being pulled in, where they're actually coming from. We forget to explain, what does it mean when you're pulling in a third-party dependency from a central repository? What does that actually mean? What is happening? What's traveling across the wire? What's being installed on your machine when that happens? Where is it actually being placed in the build? I think that this explosion of concern around security, which rightly so, we should be concerned. I think that's really bringing to light that there's a lot of education that still needs to happen there. I still see, and this is one of the announcements at SwampUp, actually, the whole idea of a signed pipeline. So being able to have your dependencies and your build happen and have it travel through your pipeline and be secure in the knowledge that nothing has been inserted in the middle, right? I think we're still in this position where there are a lot of pipelines out there where we're still pulling from a central public repository in the middle of the pipeline, or rebuilding a package after it's been tested and gone through scrutiny, rebuilding it before delivering it. And there's some of these best practices that we need to really nail down and remember to do, as developers. Being overwhelmed, yes, because there are a lot of tools, right now that are being that are available for a developer to use, a lot to learn. Again, the creator of those tools need to take some responsibility for making them safe.
Yeah, so I think, again, I have a different perspective on this. So one thing about me is I have 3 children that I know of. And like, I love being a mommy and raising tiny humans. It's great. And so one of the things that I think about is, almost you have to train children to do certain things, including to be safe. So when Pokemon Go came out, I genuinely thought my son was going to fall off of a cliff. And at some point I had to like grab him by the neck and guide him and stop him from walking in front of cars. And, I feel like, again, as an industry, if we made a part of CS education, boot camps, and online learning platforms, if we made security practices a given, it could go from a cognitive task to an associative task. I don't think it's a burden for developers to have to worry about security with their code. I think that it hasn't been an expectation. And much like, when you're raising tiny humans, you wake up one day and realize they can do things on their own. They're old enough and you've just been doing that for them. And no, that's your job now. I think developers are more than capable. Anyone who's sufficiently analytic and who likes the problem-solving aspect of software is clearly, intellectually capable of, paying attention to their security practices. I think just as an industry, we have to start setting that as an expectation and then giving them the knowledge to, as part of their education, this is a bad idea. Don't do this instead, and make it so that it's not an additional task. It's just part of development. I
wish we could. We'll see how it goes. I think part of it is making security tools that are developer friendly, right?
It's like
someone in the security world.
Well, and remember,
one at a time. I'm going to let Andreas go first. Cool, too. I'm sorry, Melissa. Give me one
So what I want to say, it's just like testing. So it's been forever since we have been saying and banking, like you should test. Doesn't matter if it's TDD or unit test, whatever it is. And there are many versions and many reasons why you want to do things one way or another. Now, finally, it looks like we are at a stage where we no longer, as developers, need to battle with managers. I need to have extra time in a sprint to do testing. Or vice versa, the managers try to convince developers, you should do testing, even though it's not production code that the client is paying for, or whatever reasons, right? It's now a given. We should do testing. So the same thing will eventually happen with security. It has to be there. Now you just have to figure out when to do it and how to do it.
But I think there's also like a Darwinian component here, like the developers that take it upon themselves to make security practices important to their role are going to be the most successful, because people who don't care about security are going to face repercussions when inevitably something bad happens. And I think, just a process of natural selection will sort of guide us as well towards, awesome developers that genuinely care about the security of their products.
Melissa?
Yeah, I was right along those lines. I mean, we're all on the same team, right? You've got the developers, you've got your ops, all the way, through deployment. We have several touch points where we can address security concerns, especially when it comes to known vulnerabilities that we know are out there. So developer in the beginning, I mean, things happen fast, things change fast, right? The moment I put a third-party dependency in my POM file, and it's fine today, it might not be fine a week from now, right? So what do you do then? You need those multiple touch points, and you need support on the back end in order to catch those things, which is why we see a lot of these tools now. I'm seeing them everywhere, in Git and Docker, and JFrog, has their products that alert you when a known vulnerability has come up for a certain part of your software. So these things need to happen continuously. It's not just like, hey, it's fine today, I'm done for the rest of this software's lifetime. No, it's something that has to be continuously revisited.
Agreed. Guys, I didn't mention at the top of the show, but one of the things we do here at MediaOps is we give out 4 Amazon gift cards to just random people who attended our show today. Not anyone on the panel, so don't get too excited, panel members. But our winners today of the Amazon gift cards are Paul R., Emmanuel F., Javier C., and Kathleen F. And our team will reach out to you and get you those gift cards. We do have a question from the audience, and then I have another area I wanted to touch on. But what does the SBOM, right? Everyone familiar with what that means? How about anybody want to clue in our audience?
I would assume that stands for Software Bill of Materials.
That's right, which is, of course, in the new executive order that President Biden had issued. It makes it kind of mandatory now, right? We talk about this supply chain factory paradigm. Got to have your software bill of materials. What do you think this is going to mean for development?
Well, there's your expectation setting that Valerie was talking about.
I mean, it took the choice out of it, that's for sure. I say that. Anyone else have any thoughts on software bill of materials?
I mean, I'll be honest, I have not researched it enough to give an intelligent opinion about it. I'm going to defer to my elders.
Okay.
In experience, not age. I'm a 40-year-old.
Yeah, I got
my
that.
experience, elders.
Well, in this case, it means that you have to disclose every other component that you use to create your product. And I don't know the extent of how long this will be or how deep it will be, which is one thing to say, these are my first level dependencies or my first level components. How far you have to go into saying the different hubs, or also not just saying these are, but from where and from whom you got it. So you have to provide the provenance. You have to be sure that nothing in between has been altered or injected or altered by some other entity, so that your product is what it's supposed to be. It is what it says that it is.
So I think it depends how it evolves. Does it become just another fine print in your software license, right? How many of you have read software licenses? When you know, even for SaaS software, right? There's always a terms and conditions, T's and C's. How many of us read all through that? Not many. I mean, I get letters every day from people who, you know, attend a webinar, for instance, and don't read the T's and C's regarding that. So if it becomes some more small font print that goes at the bottom of a software license, it's useless. If it's somehow embedded in the software, almost like a watermark or something that you can pull up quickly and see, oh my God, you know what? I just saw this version of Strut's component is vulnerable. What Strut's version am I using in this piece of software? Then it's really valuable, right?
So I think one good thing from what little I've read is that it does add, we don't know at what level, but some amount of accountability. So, you know, in a former life, I got a really useless psych degree, but I did a lot of, you know, it's not all bad. At least I got to pay the federal government $80,000 for that.
Back for you. Look, my wife was a psych major, so go easy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but I did a lot of research on, you know, the way people behave when they know they're being watched versus when they suspect they're being watched,
Right.
versus when they know beyond a shadow of a doubt they're not being watched. And I do think that anything that requires reporting is going to make people, when they're choosing the tools they use and the dependencies and I think it will make them assume someone's going to be watching, and maybe be a little bit more critical of which tools they choose. And, you know, it's almost like the reason I loved Weight Watchers is I had to be accountable. I had to tell a room full of women what I'd eaten that week. I didn't want to eat
You had to get weighed in.
I admit that I ate the French fries. I ate the
Yep.
But, you know, I think accountability is rarely a bad thing.
Fair enough.
I agree with that, definitely. You know, having that bill of materials too has many more other advantages. When you see this has happened to me over and over again in my career, where a bug comes up and it's because of an update in a dependency that we weren't aware of and didn't understand how it was going to affect the final product. So being able to go through and figure out, you know, between this build and this build, I've had these changes in my dependencies. I feel like that should be standard practice. We should know this stuff. And I wonder how, you know, now that this kind of, you know, law or regulation is coming through, I wonder how much of a surprise it's going to be for a lot of software vendors to finally get to that point where they've listed everything that is in their product. We should be doing that.
And not only that, as makers of our own dependencies, we also might need to inject additional metadata. Which machine or which node, the timestamps of other information that, again, just like that Boolean property, as a developer, it might be quite simple to get, but it might get in trouble down the road with reproducible builds and reproducible artifacts. So now we have other concerns that are jumping into our lap just because we have to prove the provenance and the status quo for that particular artifact. And that's, again, where these tools, the JFrog platform and other stuff, come into our working space and say, look, we give you a solution. Here you can do stuff. Or maybe there is some information that is missing. Oh, here's an API that you connect these two tools together, and now you can solve the SBOM problem.
Agreed. Guys, we have less than 5 minutes left. There was one area I was saving if we have time, and we do. You know, this has been a year of virtual conferences, right? None of us have gone. I'm sure most of our audience, you folks, are looking forward to going to a conference in person again. Whoever thought, can't wait to get on the line at the airport. But at the same token, many of us are kind of zoomed out, right? We're fatigued. There's multiple virtual conferences every single day, it seems. And it's easy to register for them because a lot of them are free. And then sometimes we show up, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we watch them live, sometimes we watch them on demand, right? And what I've learned is, the sessions are great. You could, because whether it's live or virtual or not, it's still good to, the sessions generally are good. It's the rest of the experience that's sometimes good, sometimes not. Sometimes it engages, sometimes doesn't. I thought SwampUp, and I'll confess, I did not do the EMEA SwampUp. I did the US one. But I thought the engagement with the audience, with not just the audience, but as peers of other attendees, being able to talk with them in a kind of running conversation. A lot of the JFrog folks I noticed were very active in sort of doing that. It made a difference for me. What makes a difference for you at these virtual events? We're all experts on them now. Beyond the sessions themselves, is there anything that makes them better or worse?
Right.
Melissa, we're going to start with you because that's when last question, and only a few minutes. So go ahead.
Okay. I'll talk fast. Okay. So there's challenges on both sides, being a consumer and then being a presenter. I'm going to give the presenter perspective. It was really difficult the first couple of times I needed to do a recording of my presentation. I didn't have anyone to look at. And usually when you're live, you can look at the audience, you can kind of gauge the interest. If you say something confusing, you can tell the wave of confusion crosses over everyone's eyes. You don't get that so much in the online conference. So we have to adapt and find other ways of doing that. So by having the pre-recorded sessions, I didn't think I would like those very much. But I swear, I'm one of those people that like to talk in the movie theater. I like to discuss the movie as it's happening. And I loved being able to do that online. I know a lot of people would hate me and now you'll never go see movies with me. But online, I loved being able to discuss the content as it was happening right then and there. It was great.
Very good. Valerie or Andreas?
I'll go. So I do agree that if I have to do something online, if the conference has to be virtual, I would vastly prefer to pre-record and be able to interact during the talk. But I stopped even submitting to CFPs for a while when I realized that going to conferences and interacting with the community and having that give and take of a face-to-face, I mean, the way I always try to format my talks to be a little conversational. I mean, I want audience interaction. That fed my soul. My sister calls me an energetic vampire, that when I'm around crowds, I just suck the energy and I'm refilled. Oh, I'm fueled. But it fed my soul. It made me feel a joy that I don't feel in very many other contexts. And after the first few virtual ones, I realized that they were just draining. Not being able to see the audience, not being able to interact, not being able to laugh and stand in the hallway afterwards and debate something. And, those things, they're just draining. But SwampUp, and there have been a couple others I have done where we've pre-recorded, so there is some level of interaction online. Those, to me, have been, as a presenter, the most tolerable. And
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
What about you, Andres? Like how
Take it home, Andres.
I have the same feeling. So I'm an introvert. So doing this is quite sometimes it's difficult, but that's now my job. That's what I chose. And having that the missing feedback loop when you're recording something, as Melissa said, just having a reaction by the audience makes you switch gears and go faster, go slower, explain something again. It's difficult to have that when you're recording. But platforms and events like SwamUp, where despite having that recording, gives you the option to interact with the audience. They're asking questions while they're watching your recording. It's almost as being in person with them in the same room. So the level of interactivity is more than traditional online events. And so that's what I like. And one thing that I'm looking forward is, again, going back to face-to-face events, but keeping online events as well. Because for like myself and some other people, I don't like to travel so much, or at least I don't like planes or airports because it takes too long. So I can talk to people in Asia while I'm still sitting in Switzerland, which is something that I will never do or will rarely do. So other colleagues that have families, they can talk to people and go on a conference at 8 in the evening, and then they're done. They don't have to travel. So you have advantages for both face-to-face and online events.
Excellent. Guys, we're at the top of the hour, and we respect everyone's time. We try. Valerie, Andreas, Melissa, JFrog, sponsoring this. Thank you so much for coming and participating today. To our audience, I know some of you wrote that it was interesting and you got something out of it. I'm glad. I hope the rest of you did. You can still go watch those SwampUps on demand, so go check those out. You can get to them, I think, at swampup.jfrog.com or something like that, yes, or at jfrog.com. Yep, swampup.jfrog.com, online sessions. You got to love the back-end people who make it happen. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on another MediaOps, DevOps.com, Security Boulevard Container Journal webinar soon. Have a great day, a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.